So, welcome back to our Chasing Vines devotional day 3, which will be on the concept of pruning. And this again is from Beth Moore's book called Chasing Vines. So, let's begin. So, Beth says, nothing is more painful to the branch than pruning, and nothing is more irresponsible for the vine dresser than avoiding it. Pruning season occurs primarily during winter months when limbs are leafless and dormant. The vine dresser typically pulls out his shears just before bud break, which feels like the worst possible time to the branch. This timing could lead the branch to believe that the gardener is anxious to bring to an end what already appears half dead. Of course, the branch could not be more mistaken. The branch is very much alive and never more poised for fruitfulness than in the wake of winter. We know how the grapevine feels, don't we? We've been there, on the cusp of something fresh and wonderful, only to have our starry-eyed love dampened, our awakened passion quenched, our budding victory vanquished. This kind of trimming feels unjust. You can see the budding. It's right there before your eyes. You can taste the breakthrough on the tip of your tongue. But just before it comes to fruition, faith made sight, your breakthrough ends up looking suspiciously more like a breakdown. What you must trust in these moments is that anything God breaks down is intended to build you up. Anything He cuts off is to give breathing space to what He's adding on. Sometimes it's too soon to come to full bloom. The gardener who will not subject his branches to pruning is not merciful. He is murderous. Slowly, yes, but surely. He'll first kill the quality, then the flavor, and finally the fruit itself. This is suffocation by overcrowding, or what the experts call overcropping. Like overcropping in a given year reduces the fruitfulness of buds in the subsequent year. So the best way to guarantee that your vines produce adequately year after year is to prune them properly year after year. An unpruned vine will have from 10 to 100 times the buds necessary for a good crop of quality grapes. The vine struggles for quantity, thus maximizing its chances to reproduce. The vintner struggles for quality, maximizing his or her chances for a perfect vintage. We dwell in an age of aesthetics, where beauty is chief among aims, don't we? The purpose of the branch, however, is not the beauty of a painter's canvas, a well-tended vine covered in leaves, misty with dew, filtered through the light of dawn. No, the purpose of the branch is benefit, and its benefit is found in its fruitfulness. The gardener's shears cut away a future of increasing uselessness. Pruning, according to Jesus, is a really good sign. It doesn't just signal future fruit, it's proof of previous fruit. Every branch in me that does not bear fruit, the vine dresser takes away, and every branch that does bear fruit, He prunes. John 15:2. John 15 paints the picture of a vine dresser painstakingly devoted to our progress. In verse 2, it's bear fruit and bear more fruit, and in verse 8, it's bear much fruit. No one loses. As Christ puts it, here are the benefits of pruning. Verse 8 is, my Father is glorified, and you prove to be my disciples. And verse 11 is, my joy may be in you, and your joy may be full. It may take a while for joy to come in the midst of pruning, but it is inevitable. God, creator of shrub and tree, who planted and landscaped Eden, has intimate knowledge of the health of every branch and the potential of every bud on His vine. While every branch that does bear fruit He prunes, the way He prunes each is His call entirely. He controls the metaphor in John 15. The metaphor does not control Him. That means He can get creative with His shears. But I'll tell you what He can't do. He can't do evil. He can't be unloving, because He Himself is love. His goodness is inseparable from his glory. Exodus 33:18 and 19. So you can believe, as David did in Psalm 27, that you will see the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living. For some of us, the pruning begins early in life, and others may remain relatively intact until the later decades of life. By no means is all loss pruning, but pruning can certainly look like loss. It can also look like relational fracture or like failure, weakness or sickness, because it involves paring back in some capacity. God can use it all if we allow the shears to do their work. The purpose is always the same: growth. Longevity doesn't do much for pre-cut Christmas trees, but age is actually a bonus when it comes to faith. We weathered ones have learned by now how seasons often go, and how what sometimes appears to be a fierce killing ends up being a peculiar healing. God has pared us back over and over, and he has made us fruitful again, not always in the same ways, but always in some way. We've learned that barrenness, spiritually speaking, is optional. It's the fruit of uncooperativeness. God doesn't prune everyone by the same hard, fast rule, but every fruitful branch, without exception, will experience cutbacks. Jesus declared this in John 15:2. He prunes the branches that do bear fruit so they will produce even more. That's in the New Living Translation. Here's how the pattern frequently goes. So the young life awakened in Christ is fresh-faced and full of promise. Eyes are full of vision, heart is full of passion, ears are full of direction. The young man knows exactly where he's headed. The young woman knows precisely what she's called to be. They each set out on their path, and just about the time they really start to bloom, the clipping ensues. Life gets hard, affirmation decreases, passion wanes, inspiration dries up, material doesn't materialize, clarity turns to cloudiness. Phase 1 is normally annoyance with God. You led me here, then left me here. You told me to go, then didn't come through. Don't be surprised if you experience an ironic sense of lostness just when you thought you'd found what you were looking for. This can be its own form of pruning. It reminds us that what we really want is God. Neither arrival nor achievement can keep us satisfied, only abiding can. God never calls us to something only to abandon us once we've arrived. He's at work, whether or not we see a whit of evidence. Phase 2 is self-doubt. God didn't mislead me. I misled myself. I made it up and called it God. With this phase usually comes embarrassment, since after all, you told people you'd been called. The truth is, you were indeed called, and your calling is irrevocable. This setback is for the sake of your calling, not in spite of it. Difficulty is paramount to producing. Without it, your output may exceed your input and prove you to be all skin and no pulp. Phase 3 is the Valley of Decision. This is a critical season because here you will either withdraw to a less vulnerable proximity or cling closer to Jesus despite the appearances of promises aborted. Will you hang around for the training? This becomes the million-dollar question. At times, God is too close for us to see. We lose sight of how he's working until months or years later, when we're able to step back and gain a broader perspective. Beth says she frequently thinks about Moses pleading with God to show him his glory. God knew Moses couldn't handle what he was requesting, so he told him he'd hide him in the crevice of a rock and cover him with his hand while his glory passed by. Then I will take away my hand and you shall see my back, but my face shall not be seen. Exodus 33:23. At times, we're in the dark because God is revealing some aspect of his glory that's more than we can stare straight in the face. The beauty in the darkness is that God is close enough to cover us with his hand, often at the end of a tremendously intense season. He'll grace us with a glimpse of his back. He gives us just enough evidence of his presence for us to realize he was there all along, not as a spectator or even just as a protector, but as Lord over all. It may be fair to say that God is never closer to us than he is during the pruning process. He can't avoid holding a branch when he's pinching off blooms with his thumbnail. With God as gardener, pruning is always a hands-on endeavor. He can't let us go when he's cutting us back. His tending is never impersonal, never mechanical, never by the long arm of the law. What most of us didn't expect when we took up with him was that his presence would sometimes cause pain. We expected his presence to relieve pain, and to our great relief it usually does. But who would Isaiah have turned out to be without "Woe is me, for I am undone"? Isaiah 6:5. Or what about David without the repentant cry, "Let the bones that you have broken rejoice," in Psalm 51:8? Or Job without, "Even if he kills me, I will hope in him," Job 13:15. These slayings were their makings. They may be ours too. God cuts back a fruitful vine only to increase its fruitfulness. That's why growing can look a lot like shrinking. Remember, the vine dresser is after quality. God is on to us when our motivation for being cooperative in a cutback is to get back to bigness. His idea of increased fruitfulness may never be humanly measurable. It may be a matter of taste, in the subtle notes of a cluster of grapes that never outgrows a woman's fist. As long as you can meet somebody's need, you will have purpose. It doesn't take much to matter. It just takes meaning. Your growing comes in shrinking.